So, what happens when a president's biggest economic policy runs headfirst into the highest court in the land? Well, today, on February 20th, 2026, we are finding out. The U.S. Supreme Court just dropped a bombshell ruling that goes right to the heart of President Trump's global tariff plan, and it is a massive legal blow.
Okay, let's just cut right to the chase. Here's the monumental headline. The Supreme Court has found that the president went way beyond his constitutional authority. His ambitious, some might even say unprecedented, emergency tariffs that were slapped on almost all of America's trading partners, well, they've been officially struck down. And believe me, this is a decision with immediate and powerful consequences.
So how in the world did the Supreme Court get to this point? To really understand the impact here, we have to dig into the legal arguments that pretty much dismantled the administration's entire case.
First off, that number right there, 6-3. This wasn't some squeaker of a decision, not by a long shot. That is a decisive majority, and it sends a really powerful message that this wasn't a close call. It's a clear, forceful statement from the court that, as they see it, what the president did was illegal.
So the court really zeroed in on this one law, the IEPA. They argued that it was designed for genuine, targeted crises. Things like freezing the assets of a hostile nation. It was never intended to be a tool for our president to single-handedly overhaul global trade policy affecting trillions of dollars. The court basically saw it as a fundamental misuse of the power that law grants.
And this quote from Chief Justice Roberts, man, it just gets right to the very heart of the issue. He brought the whole argument back to a bedrock principle of the Constitution. Think of it like this. The Constitution basically gives Congress the nation's credit card. The president can't just grab it and go on a global tariff shopping spree without explicit permission.
But listen, this ruling is about so much more than just these specific tariffs. No way. This drills down into a fundamental, ongoing debate about where the true balance of power really lies in Washington.
What we're seeing here is a huge check on presidential power. The court is essentially drawing a big, bright red line in the sand, saying that while the president's authority is vast, they can't just rewrite the entire economic rulebook on their own. That power, especially when it comes to taxes and tariffs, belongs firmly to the legislative branch.
And this decision powerfully reinforces a legal idea you're probably going to hear a lot more about, the major questions doctrine. It's kind of like the court telling the executive branch, look, if you're going to make a really big economy-altering move, you need a crystal-clear permission slip from Congress, not some creative interpretation of a law from the 70s.
Of course, a legal decision this big doesn't just stay in the courtroom. The second that news dropped, you can bet phones were ringing off the hook on Wall Street and in capital cities all the way from Brussels to Beijing.
And the reactions? Well, they were complicated. A lot of U.S. companies that had been on the hook for these tariffs, they let out a huge collective sigh of relief, hoping this might ease their rising costs. But, and this is a huge but, the court left this giant multi-billion-dollar question just hanging there. What happens to all the money that's already been paid? That massive legal brawl now gets kicked down to the lower courts, creating a whole new level of uncertainty.
But just as everyone was starting to process the ruling, the White House fired back. And that response was, fast, defiant, and it made one thing crystal clear. This conflict is far from over.
At a press briefing, President Trump did not mince words, calling the institution a disgrace. Now, by attacking the court's integrity like that, he's strategically reframing this. It's not just a legal defeat anymore, it's a political battle, and he's trying to rally his supporters against what he's calling a biased judiciary.
And yeah, this wasn't just tough talk. The administration immediately laid out their plan B, vowing to find other legal ways to get their tariff goals. This is a crucial signal. They are not backing down. They're basically saying, you blocked this door, so we're going to find an open window, kicking off a brand new and probably more complicated chapter in this whole saga.
And remember, all of this is unfolding with a huge election cycle right around the corner and a very watchful, maybe even nervous economy looking on.
I mean, the timing here is just explosive. This ruling is like a political grenade that just got tossed right into the middle of the 2026 midterm election season.
All of a sudden, the limits of presidential power and the stability of the U.S. economy are front and center campaign issues.
And this dragged-out fight is exactly what has economists worried. This kind of uncertainty, it acts like a brake on the economy. Businesses get really hesitant to invest or hire when the basic rules of trade could just change overnight. And that could have a very real impact on everything from jobs to economic growth.
Okay, so that was a lot. With all these moving pieces, what are the essential things you need to walk away with? Let's boil this all down to the absolute bottom line.
Here's the situation in a nutshell. The Supreme Court just put up a big constitutional guardrail, reinforcing that Congress is in charge of the economy's purse strings. But the administration is already looking for a detour. This leaves billions of dollars in refunds stuck in legal limbo and injects a massive dose of uncertainty right into America's political and economic future.
At the end of the day, this ruling might have answered one legal question, but it has forced a much, much bigger one out into the open. In a deeply divided America, who really holds the reins of economic power? And the answer to that question, well, that's going to shape the future of the entire nation,